getting emotional just thinking about it. And I was like, but when it's good, I'm fine. And when it's bad, I'm not fine. And she was like, but it's bad and you're not fine. Like, it doesn't matter what we call this. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Elizabeth, also known as Nurse Abe here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and I am a labor and delivery nurse, postpartum nurse, and certified childbirth educator, and also a mom to three. Coming at you guys today with some kind of important information about the postpartum period, okay? These are going to be 5 myths, 5 postpartum myths that I wanted debunked yesterday, but we're going to jump into them today so that you know what best to expect for postpartum and also like what's going on. I think a lot of times we spend so much time planning, prepping for labor, for birth, that it can be hard to see over that mountain and realize that there is a whole mountain range that we are still going to be working on, still climbing and working and striving towards meeting our goal. So let's go ahead and jump into it. The first one that I think is definitely perpetuated by TV and the media in general and celebrities and this, that, and the other is that after you give birth, you're gonna immediately look like you've never given birth. Your tummy is gonna be flat and maybe your boobs are gonna look great, but everything else is gonna go back to normal immediately. This is factually and actually, for the majority of us, not true. Our bodies, after we give birth, are still in a process of immense and intense change. We are still working on bringing that uterus down through a process called involution, and it's going to be about 2 pounds and needing to go back down to 2 ounces. That's going to happen over the next 6 weeks. So you're still leaving the hospital, gonna look about 6 months pregnant. For a lot of us, there's going to be separation of the ab muscles. That's called diastasis recti. That might start to come back together over time, or we might need to do some really specific toned and targeted workouts to help bring those ab muscles back together. You're probably also going to be swollen, particularly if you've had IV fluids, epidural, cesarean birth. You are going to be really working on getting rid of that excess fluid, and it's going to take about 2 weeks for that swelling to go completely back to normal. You might even leave the hospital more swollen than when you came in. This is why I really recommend bringing flip-flops or something easy to slip on. I did have a patient maybe like a year ago leave the hospital in socks because those were the only thing that fit her. It was winter and she had worn boots into the hospital. When you go home, if you are still feeling really swollen, I really encourage you to soak your feet with some Epsom salt baths. I really encourage you to continue to get lots of hydration in because that'll actually help your body shed excess fluid. And of course, if the swelling picks up postpartum and you're noticing vision changes, your blood pressure's high, those can all be signs of preeclampsia, which you can develop postpartum. And I definitely want you to go get that checked out with your provider. The second myth that definitely got me with my second baby is that postpartum depression only really exists if you're not feeling bonded with your baby, and it really is only going to crop up in like the first 2 to 3 weeks postpartum. So if you make it past that, you're going to be easy breezy, beautiful, cover girl, no postpartum depression for you. Hooray. Unfortunately, while I wish that this were true, it is not always the case. We actually have a whole group of anxiety and mood disorders that can occur during our pregnancy or anywhere in that 1 to 2 years even postpartum. They're called PMADs, perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And while we typically think of postpartum depression and feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not bonded with my baby as kind of the overarching issue that can happen with postpartum, we actually have a whole host of other things that can occur in that first year postpartum. So we've got postpartum rage, postpartum OCD, postpartum anxiety, and postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis being the most rare and also the most intense out of these mood disorders. For me personally, I had a really hard time recognizing postpartum anxiety and depression in myself with my second child because all of my intrusive thoughts and all of my anxiety was related to breastfeeding. So when he was breastfeeding well, I felt great, but when he wasn't breastfeeding well, I really could not cope, and I would sit awake waiting for him to wake up and being so terrified that he was going to wake up with a dry diaper, feeling like I was a failure. While I loved him, wishing like, why did I do this? Why did I change our family? Feeling like I wasn't enough for my older child, exploding on her when she absolutely was doing nothing more than being 2.5. It was a really hard and difficult time for me. And I went and saw my OB, and I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. And I was like, but when it's good, I'm fine. And when it's bad, I'm not fine. And she was like, but it's bad and you're not fine. Like, it doesn't matter what we call this. We need to like help you figure out how to deal with these changes with your life. So I started on medications, I saw a therapist, all things that were exceptionally helpful. And I look back at that time, and right now in my super rational mind, I'm like, why did I feel like it was so important? Like it had to be all or nothing with breastfeeding, like it had to be all or nothing with either directly feeding from the breast or pumping. Like I gave myself absolutely zero wiggle room. I was so obsessed with my supply. I was so neurotically obsessed with charting feeds and sleeps and pees and poops and all of these things that right now I'm like, that's not a big deal. But it was a big deal then, and guess what? It was a big deal again after I had my third baby and things didn't go exactly 100 swimmingly according to plan. I want you to give yourself the biggest hug and the biggest grace and really reach out to your support systems and to your OB provider and to your PCP, because like you shouldn't have to feel this way. This is not who you are in the postpartum period. And I hate that if you feel like, okay, well, I'm bonded with my baby, that's all it needs to be. If you've had a baby before, you might remember the Edinburgh scoring, the test. It's like 10 questions where you like rate yourself on like yes sometimes, yes all the time, no never, etc., etc. There's a modified one that's just 3 questions. I have blamed myself unnecessarily when things go wrong. I have been anxious or worried for no good reason. I have felt scared or panicky for no good reason. Unnecessarily and for no good reason, I'm going to put those in parentheses because in the moment it might feel like it's for a very good reason and it's not unnecessary. But if these feelings are invading how you are able to sleep, feed yourself, shower, take care of yourself, take care of your baby, right? Then we need to address them. If you are managing super, super well from the outside, right, it seems, but you're so terrified to take your baby in the car and go more than 40 miles an hour that you never leave your house with them, you're isolated, you're anxious. And so we have gotten so much better about talking about these things and normalizing these things. And I want to continue to do that for you and let you know that you are not alone if you are feeling these things and that you do not have to feel like this. And we have a lot of ways that we can help. I will leave some resources in my description for postpartum support help and reaching out for help with that, because it's a really, really challenging time and it's so much more than just not bonding with your baby and postpartum depression. Okay, number 3, you don't need a plan for postpartum, right? We think a lot about planning for our baby's birth. And when we think about planning for postpartum, maybe we're thinking about what monitor we're gonna buy, what crib we're gonna purchase, what kind of stroller and travel system we're gonna get. We might even think about physically preparing for postpartum and purchasing things that are going to be treats for our seats, which are not a bad thing. But we also need to plan and prioritize for things postpartum that are kind of meeting, if we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the very bottom. Eating, sleeping, laundry, right? Taking care of our household. How are these things going to change and how can we prepare for them? There's actually this really cool app where you can set up different tasks and meals that you might want, almost like a meal train, but for everything postpartum. So maybe having somebody help with laundry, maybe having somebody come over and help you get some sleep. A postpartum doula is also another resource that can be helpful in addition to family and friends. And when someone offers you help, accept it, but let's try and set up these things before the baby comes, okay? One of our biggest things that we can do to fight against PMADs is to, at some point in a 24-hour period, find 4 hours to sleep and to get 4 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period consecutively. How can we maximize that for you? It might not happen in the first few weeks postpartum as we're working on breastfeeding and getting baby back up to their birth weight or whatever, but hopefully at some point in that 24-hour window, we can help find that for you. We need a plan for that before baby comes. We need a plan for how our roles are going to change, how you're still going to get me time and self-care time, how you are going to make meals. One thing that I've seen people do even is like do a nesting party where they have people come over and help them do all their nesting things, including making freezer meals. All of these things are going to set us up for a more seamless transition to postpartum, because here's the wild thing is when you have a baby, you not only are taking care of this baby, but you're also recovering from giving birth to this baby. And one of those on their own would be a massive life change, but we're doing 2 together. Of course we're going to need some help. And the help isn't necessarily somebody coming over and holding your baby so you can clean your house. That's very silly. Your job is to take care of your baby, and your village's job is to take care of you so that you can take care of your baby. And sometimes we have to make our village. Sometimes it's not as natural and organic as we would have hoped and prayed for. But having a plan for postpartum, setting up some things during your pregnancy is going to be exceptionally helpful in making this transition as smooth as it possibly can. It's probably not going to be the smoothest thing in the world, but what can we do to help aid in that? The next two are going to be about our pelvic floor. Okay, these are the groups of muscle that hold up our uterus, our rectum, and our bladder. All super important, that had to yield and baby came through, and so we might have some weakness, we might have some tightness, we might have some other stuff going on, right? Seeing a pelvic floor physical therapist, definitely super helpful and important. I have 2 videos with Michelle Little, who is a dear friend and is a postpartum and labor support expert with pelvic health. She has a few classes that you can take virtually. She also sees people in person and virtually as well. So I'll leave her link down below, as well as my other videos with her. One thing that's touted on as being super normal and even funny is like, now that I've had a baby, I can't jump on a trampoline. I can't hear running water, right? I can't hold in my pee if I sneeze. Or this one's not as funny, not as routinely haha, but like, oh, I can't hold in my gas. Oh, it takes me a bajillion wipes to get all the poop off my butt, and I'm always having skid marks in my underwear. Okay? These are signs of pelvic floor dysfunction. Feeling of heaviness, right? All things that are not normal. And we need to stop normalizing them, because what we do with that information, right? They're common. I don't want you to feel weird or bad that these are happening to you, but I don't want you to be like, well, this is just how my life is now, and not seek further treatment, because you deserve a functioning pelvic floor. And also, when we hit menopause and estrogen goes out the window, we don't want all of that pelvic floor dysfunction to really come and slap us in the face, okay? Working on things now is going to be helpful. This is my commitment. I'm going to go back and see the pelvic floor physical therapist, because when I saw her initially postpartum, I was not in the place to do the exercises and the things that I needed to do, because I was not getting sleep. I was not getting rest, and I had postpartum depression and anxiety, right? That wasn't really the vibe for me right then. So I'm not saying if you don't do this immediately postpartum that you're going to be up a creek, but I am saying that it's something that I want you to take into consideration if you're having any of these symptoms and experiences. The other day I was washing my hands and I almost peed my pants. And I was like, ooh, we need to address some things down below. So I'm going to go do it soon. I hope that you will too, if you're having any of those issues. The last thing that I want to address again comes down to pelvic floor health, that it is normal when you have sex postpartum, that it's going to hurt a whole bunch and you just have to muscle through it. First of all, we don't have to do anything we don't want to do, number 1. Number 2, just because you've had your 6-week follow-up appointment does not mean that you are emotionally, physically, even sometimes ready for sexual intercourse, intimacy, and that is okay. But also, number 3, if it's painful, if you're having problems with the penis entering, if you're having friction problems, these are all things that we can address, and you do not have to muscle through and just get through it for your partner, because a partner who's really there for you shouldn't just want to get their rocks off. They should want it to be a mutually enjoyable experience. And it might be different than before you've had a baby. Hopefully it's going to be even a little bit better, right? But it should not be painful or hurt. So a pelvic floor physical therapist can be really helpful. We also know that having adequate lubrication is going to be helpful if you're breastfeeding and your estrogen's low. Things are still going to be fairly dry down there. And so a water-based lubrication, like slippery stuff, can be great. But just muscling through it is super not the vibe, and just not the way that we want to be doing things. Having thought on all these, I actually have a bonus one about postpartum recovery, and it's that if you're not feeling good, if things are not feeling like they're healing appropriately, that you should wait and not bother your doctor until your 6-week follow-up appointment. I'm calling baloney here. I want every day for things to be feeling a little bit better. Just a little bit. A lot would be great, but a little bit. If all of a sudden your belly is getting way more tender, or your incision is hurting way more, or you're noticing my bleeding is picking up, I can't even sit because where I tore is hurting so badly, we should not be waiting for that 6-week follow-up appointment. There are things that can happen in the immediate postpartum period that can be really uncomfortable or also potentially life-threatening that we need to deal with. So I don't want you to just muscle through it. I actually have a whole video on postpartum warning signs and what to look out for that I'm going to link for you guys. I want you to watch that, and then I want you, if things aren't getting better, for you to call your provider. Okay, there are things that can happen postpartum that we need to deal with in that moment and not wait till the 6-week follow-up appointment. And there are also things that we can just deal with sooner so that you can feel better sooner. So please do not feel like you need to wait 6 weeks. Honestly, we shouldn't be waiting 6 weeks, but that's a story for another video. Let me tell you what, because this girl can get riled up about that. Okay, let me know if any of these myths were things that you thought to be true beforehand. Let me know if there's any other myths that you have heard about postpartum. And until next time, bye guys.